All right, today we're jumping into a concept that really flips the script on how we think about social change. It's called the revolution of the mind. Right off the bat, the source material draws a line in the sand. This isn't a revolution of violence, it's a revolution of understanding. So it's a total shift away from everything we usually picture when we hear that word.
So what is it really? Well, it's a philosophy built on a really simple but honestly pretty profound belief that true, lasting change doesn't start with new laws or leaders. It starts inside our own heads. It's about a shift in our values, not some kind of political takeover.
Okay, let's get into our first section, a revolution of understanding. How in the world does a revolution powered by reflection actually work? Let's break it down. This chart just lays it out so clearly. On the left, you've got the old playbook: force, control, overthrowing the system. But on the right, you see a completely new model emerge. It's powered by reflection, it seeks healing, and it spreads through personal realization. It's a totally different engine for change. And this right here illustrates the core strategy perfectly. The idea isn't to charge at the old systems head-on. It's to change ourselves so deeply that those old systems just become obsolete. Kind of like a snake shedding its skin. It just doesn't fit anymore.
On to our next section, the weight we carry. So, why is this kind of revolution even necessary in the first place? Well, the philosophy argues it's because we fundamentally misunderstood the root of our problems. Let's dig into the why.
So according to the source material, when people do harmful things, it's usually not born out of pure malice. It's almost always a symptom of something deeper going on: unresolved pain, constant stress, learned behaviors, or just that profound feeling of being powerless.
And that leads to this incredibly important point, which is really the core belief of this whole idea. People are not inherently broken. It's a complete rejection of the idea that we're all just fundamentally flawed.
Instead, the problem gets a new frame. People are simply overwhelmed by burdens they never asked for. And this compassionate view is really the foundation for everything else in this philosophy.
So this question is the real turning point, right? If the problem is just being overwhelmed and reacting without thinking, then what's the solution? What does becoming aware actually do for us?
Which brings us to Section 3, the unlearning process. This is where we get into the nuts and bolts of how personal change kicks off. And it's not about learning more. It's about a process of unlearning all those automatic reactions we've been carrying around.
This is what's described as the true spark. It's not a loud protest. It's a quiet, personal moment of realization. That single moment where you recognize, hey, wait a second, I have a choice about this thought.
So here's how it works in our minds. The first step is just noticing our automatic reactions. That awareness, that simple act of noticing, creates a tiny pause, a little bit of space between the trigger and our response.
And in that tiny pause, for maybe the first time, we can actually make a conscious decision. We're not on autopilot anymore. We can actively choose how to respond.
And that choice, well, that's everything. That's the moment we take our power back. This simple internal chain reaction, awareness, space, choice, this is what's presented as the engine of real transformation.
Okay, so that's the internal process. But for this kind of shift to really take root across society, the external environment has to be right. This philosophy outlines 5 specific conditions that are absolutely required for this change to flourish. Let's walk through these 5. First, basic needs have to be met. You just can't reflect and grow when you're in survival mode. So food, safety, shelter, that's the groundwork. Second, we have to break trauma cycles by seeking to understand behavior instead of just shaming it. Third, there has to be space without judgment so we can get curious about what we believe without fear. Fourth, a clear commitment to non-harm. And finally, just a willingness to grow and accepting that it's a messy, ongoing process.
And this quote is really highlighted for a reason. The whole structure depends on this idea. Before you can ask someone to heal, they have to be stable. It's presented not as a nice little bonus, but as the essential starting block.
All right, our final section, what comes first? And this part is fascinating because it explores a little debate inside the source material itself. It's that classic chicken and egg question when it comes to change.
So what really needs to happen first? Is it the external stability that lets us change? Or is it the internal choice that creates the stability?
You've got 2 different perspectives here. On the one hand, the main document argues that you have to meet basic needs first. You got to get out of survival mode before you even have the mental space for reflection.
But then there's another viewpoint that argues that the choice to think differently can actually happen at any time. And that choice itself can be the catalyst that empowers someone to find a way to get their needs met. It's a subtle difference, but a really important one.
And that really brings us to the big takeaway. This revolution isn't a destination. It's not some utopia we finally arrive at. Instead, it's framed as a continuous, daily practice, a choice we have to make over and over again.
So in the end, the entire concept is turned right back around to us, to the individual. It suggests that this huge societal shift doesn't start with some leader or policy, but with a personal decision. And it leaves us with one final question to ponder. If this revolution is a practice, where does it begin for you?